Hey, what's up, guys? I'm going to assume that I'm live here. All right, guys, we're back. We switch this camera around. All right, guys, we're back. Sorry about that. YouTube has notified me that there was something messed up with the stream. And they let me pick back up where we left off, which I thought was just fine. So it wasn't me, it was YouTube. They requested feedback, and I just went ahead and got back on here. All right, picking up where we left off, man. I don't know what all you heard a minute ago, but Stan Lee had an interesting career to begin with, right? Started in comics at 18, basically because his uncle was like a publisher or something, and they were bringing him in for a job that was supposed to be temporary. He just kept working. Ended up becoming a World War II vet, and with his, of course, his writing background. He ended up writing quite a few things for the military, like training manuals, and I'm sure a lot more than that. And then when he came back from World War II, he met Joni. Joni was ended up becoming his wife. It was the love of his life, and he ended up taking her. Yeah, thanks, man. I'm just here for this sad day with Stan Lee. But basically, he meets Joni, and this is what I was saying a minute ago. I don't know if it made it on the stream a minute ago when it got abandoned here, but by YouTube. YouTube messed it up. It's not my stuff. But anyway, but basically, what I said a minute ago was like I had a stepdad that I didn't get along with. It's no secret, but every now and then he would say something profound that I think would just be spot on. And he was talking about going to a funeral for his family member, and he didn't like how everybody was talking about the guy. They were just remembering the good things, and he was all about the good and the bad. The good and the bad about something because that's what made the person. You accepted them for everything you were. Uh, so that's the thing about Stan Lee. I'm not saying that there was good and bad things about it, but the man lived a life. When he saw something, he wanted it. Yeah, everybody's like picking up on the news and stuff like that, right? So I figured I'd do this video because on Facebook and I'm getting messages and I seriously am having friends who are having a big problem with Stan Lee passing away. The girl I'm dating, her son's going to have a hard time with it thanks to the Marvel movies. But Stan Lee met Joni. To me, we can talk about his accomplishments and the controversy he's had over the years with comics, but to me, I'm always a sucker for the part where these guys seem to find the love of their lives and stuff like that. Jack Kirby had Roz, Stan Lee had Joni. Joni was married and she moved to Nevada for 6 months. And back in the day, that's how you got a divorce. You would move wherever you were living, you go to Nevada because you just took 6 months, and then they were together. Stan Lee reached a point where he was wanting to quit comics, and it was Joni who looked at him and said, "Do these comics the way you want to do them. You're quitting anyway." And Stan Lee had those visions of like, you know, more realistic characters that act like family. They feuded and they would fight and they would rib each other. And he had the idea of a continuity, a shared universe, the world outside your window and stuff. So it was, thanks to Joni telling her man to do it, we got the Marvel Universe, however you want to do it. And Stan Lee was right in there steering the ship. That's the thing about Stan Lee. It took me a while to come to peace with. The guy had a ton of his own accomplishments, and you have to give credit where credit is due. And I've started doing that in the past few years with him. Right? I'm a Kirby guy, so Stan Lee had those things, right? But what did Stanley ended up doing? He gave great interviews. He became a character. He became one of the first people to get the hair plugs, in his hair. He had his pulse. He had his hand on the pulse of counterculture in the 60s. He could talk to kids. He made you feel like you were part of comics. He had great advice for people, like you have to remember every comic could be somebody's first new comic. You know what I mean? And then we moved on, and he's always, to me, the one that, at least from being a reader, who was kind of always pushing comics to be bigger and more, and to go into other medias and stuff. He would give his the people that he worked with, creators and stuff, credit, saying things like they were on the East Coast, if they'd been born on the West Coast, they'd be making movies and stuff. Stan's creations have saved lives everywhere. I agree with that, Tommy. Um, You know, he provided a lot of childhoods for us, and I'm having a phone call that I'll have to get later. But Stan, it's what I'm saying. I have a lot of people who are upset about the Stan Lee thing, so this might be a little bit everywhere, right? So Stan Lee ends up coming. You know, we get taglines like Excelsior and Hey True Believer and stuff with this phone call pass. Three people have touched childhoods: Dr. Seuss, Walt Disney, and Stan. That's very good. I mean, that's what we're here for, to talk about Stan Lee a little bit and stuff, right? But the biggest thing I go back to Joni's stuff is one of the things that Stan Lee did is that he wrote in Joni as Gwen Stacy, and that's when I fell in love with the character of Gwen Stacy. You know, I came on well after Gwen Stacy was killed in the comics and stuff like that, but to find out what that Joni inspired Gwen, it just was a way of communicating to me that Stan Lee loved his wife. She was an inspiration to him. She pushed the boundaries and stuff. 80s come along, and I'm not, you know, I'm a kid and I'm starting to get the new comics and stuff, and all the comics are saying Stan Lee presents, and I'm not seeing really a lot of writing by Stan. Then I run across this two-issue Silver Surfer book through Epic Comics out of continuity with Mobius, and I turn around and he is, um, you know, writing this masterful piece of Silver Surfer with Mobius and stuff about religion and stuff. And this led me into reading a poem that he had done about people, everyday people, and religion and God and stuff like that. And this poem, I should have looked it up before I got in here, but it was just amazing. You know, I was like, this is the dude that wrote these comic books and stuff. The guy was a writer that was in there. People knew Stanley. I ran into people who just loved Stanley. The sunglasses, the mustache, the hair, the voice of Marvel. Gave great interviews, got you pumped up, always excited. Then he had Saturday mornings where he would pop up and he would have these little, and he would have these little segments before the Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends or the Incredible Hulk or something, where he would come out and say a few things, or he would do a voiceover. I think it was a voiceover. Then you had the '90s cartoons where you had the Marvel Superhero Power Hour with Iron Man and the Fantastic Four, and he would come out in segments then. So he was always a face and a character, and he had the taglines and stuff. And that led up to pushing the movies and stuff. He would always come up. And you know, Stan Lee was always sort of just a staple of comics. Love him or hate him. Yeah, he was pop culture. Stan Lee himself became pop culture, big time. Been a fan of yours and subscriber for a while. Never posted to now. Sad news. Glad to have it delivered by way of your video here. Dave in Vancouver. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. So it's a sad day, but like I said, I'm not sad. The guy had a full life. The guy became a household name. And one of the things that really got me about what he was doing is that I think one of the things that kind of made me have a little bit of peace about Stan Lee and who created what, and Jack Kirby working at home on the Fantastic Four and things like that, was when we came out with, he actually worked for DC, and they gave him they gave him a ton of one shots of just imagine Stan Lee. I know it's mirrored, guys. Sorry. Just imagine Stan Lee, you know, working on the DC, you know, creating the DC universe. And he came up with all sorts of great stories in here and stuff to what we saw what Stan Lee was. And what amazed me is that he found something that tied them all together, and it was the Earth. You had Green Lantern with the green, Batman. He found all sorts of things that really made a cohesive universe in just a few one shots with these greats coming up and stuff. So we get to see Stan Lee jumping in there, and for someone like me that had heard over the years that maybe he didn't create this or maybe he had the idea or things like that, you got to see what the guy could do. And the guy was pure comics. He got it. Yeah. So yeah, Excelsior to Stan Lee, and it is a sad day, but like I said, I'm not sad about it. The guy's a household name. He got to spend his life with the love of his life. And the last couple years for him were rough, man. He was making the news, people coming after him for money. His wife passed away, having to sue people. uh, allegations that he was being used and things like that. Just nobody really advocating for him. Nurses accusing him of coming after him. Just bad stuff, man. Hey, Matilda, I'm back. Yeah. So, yeah, it was just. Oh, wow, man. I'm getting some comments here. There's a lot of people here, man. But like I said, it's just a rainy day. Rainy days always make me think about comics, and it's a rainy day on a Monday thinking about comics, and Stan Lee has passed. Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, this I don't know if I'm back, but I've joked over the years about Stan Lee. Made a few videos and stuff that ribbed him for fun and stuff. But Stan Lee was a controversial figure for me. Stan Lee was a raw spot for a while. And I'm just so glad that over the last couple years, doing YouTube videos and squashing a lot of stuff in my head about him, really seeing how he steered the ship, how without him there would be no comic books, no Marvel Universe movies from the last 10 years, no cartoons on Saturday morning. Um, it's really tough when we lose people that create and are able to really touch you through everything, touch you from afar, even through a comic book, through a little segment that he's doing on a little TV show, through his little cameos on the movies. Stan Lee was a character into himself. Stan Lee could have been a comic book character walking around in the real world. That booming voice, the image he created and stuff, just amazing. And the guy was wise. The guy was wise and really saw the best in people if you actually read stuff that he did outside of comics. Yeah, his movie moments and stuff, right. But like I said, the last couple years were so harsh and stuff for him. And the stuff, the news that was coming out about him, and the concern that people were having. This to me, I mean, as sad as it is, this is now he has peace. Is how I feel about it. He has peace. Um, and that's really all I got to say. I could just go on and on. I could talk about my favorite stories. I could talk about how he had a hand in one of the most perfect runs in a comic book through the 60s with Fantastic Four. Yeah. And I've got tons of people calling, guys, and I have tons of messages coming through. So I'm going to kind of cut this short. I hate that YouTube messed up this stream, but at least they let me pick it up with what happened after I think there's a 2 minute thing, man. But I'm gonna go ahead and answer some calls. I'm gonna go ahead and message some people. This is beyond comic books. This isn't just a bunch of comic book fans trying to get hold of it. It's a bunch of people that are legitimately upset. Generations of fans who were there for him in the comic books, fans that are now there for the movies. And I'm all three when I consider even the cartoons of Saturday morning with old Stan and stuff. So yeah, man, leave some comments down below after this thing uploads about Stanley if you come back and watch it. I might do this again since the stream messed up. Maybe YouTube will just take that chunk of time out. And thanks for everybody for popping in. Like I said, man, talk about Stan a little bit. Talk about your comics. Talk about your movies. Talk about what Stan Lee brought to you. You know, one childhood provided by Stan Lee. You know, that's how I kind of feel about it. Later, guys.